Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Selden. I'm the president of the Montessori Foundation, and this is Finding the Perfect Match. The Montessori Foundation, as you may know, is an international, independent school consulting, coaching, mentoring organization that's been around since 1992. Our family has been in Montessori since 1932, and we've worked with thousands of Montessori schools around the world to both help them begin, to help them to grow, to help them deal with various challenging issues, from finding a new head of school to building a high school, to starting a capital campaign, to dealing with disgruntled parents, to reducing attrition. I love marketing. Um, Speaking of which, before I get started the slideshow, my colleague is Clint Lausch. Clint, would you like to introduce yourself, or should I tell them all about you?
I appreciate it. Well, I'll do it real quick. And my name is Clint Losh, and I'm the founder owner of a software and marketing platform called AIMS, which stands for Admissions Inquiry Marketing Software. And it's truly an all-in-one software platform that can do your marketing and your admissions all the way through billing, as well as done for you marketing services. So I know many of you on here are utilizing the platform already, and if you ever wanted to take a deeper dive, you can always go to getaims.co and check out a demo, and we can hop on together and talk about how it can help your school.
And I might say that I've known Clint for almost 2 years now, and his work is so closely tied to ours of the foundation that we're really beginning to work together. And um, I don't know exactly what form that'll look like, but there'll be times when you'll see Montessori Foundation staff trying to explain what we know about him, not on this webcast, but if you're inquiring about him and vice versa. So I suspect that somehow or another we're moving in a direction of working hand in glove. Bottom line is,
Absolutely.
bottom line is, this particular webcast every Tuesday is for any school leader, whether you're in a Montessori school, an independent school, a faith-based school. We don't really care. I do want to mention that I know very well that public schools and charter schools have to market too. The purpose of this particular webcast, and we're adding on more and more, we're now doing almost 3 a week now, is to talk to school leaders specifically about finding the perfect match, recruiting and retaining your ideal enrollment, which is where Clint's service fits in. It's also where we fit in, because while Clint is an advertising agency, we try to help schools to figure out what does it take? What are you selling? How do people perceive you? What's the market where you are? How can we help you to recruit and retain more students, which is why Clint and the foundation have become such a great match. Our goal is to help you cut your attrition as low as possible. So it's both getting people in, but getting people in is not a good solution if they leave after a year or two. And whether they leave because they're disappointed that you're not doing what you said you were, or they think you were great and now they've solved their problem, they're on to the next and better thing. Attrition hurts. So we'll start with my slideshow at the beginning. A Montessori child can never be replaced. And I would suggest that that's true regardless of what school you're running. Uh, a child is more than a seat that's paying tuition or bringing in state funding. A child is precious. A child represents an emotional commitment that we make as school leaders, that our teachers make as people who love those kids. By the way, they often wish the kids came without parents, right? Um, and we also, these kids, and I'm speaking as someone who grew up in one of these schools, we become friends with our other kids and their families. And if they leave, then frankly, we're going to tend to leave. A Montessori child can never be replaced, though, has two meanings. One, we want to create schools that have as stable and bonded a relationship with children and families as we can possibly get. The other is when parents leave, they tend to suck their friends with them. The other thing is in any school, regardless of what school, parochial school, public school, charter school, Montessori school, Waldorf school, every time we get a new child into our school, we have to help that family to bond to us, to get used to us. The child's got to learn how to fit into the community. It is not a pretty picture. We cannot live long if we have a 30-40% attrition every year. And any school in any market can suddenly have a drop of between 5%, which is the lowest I usually ever see, and 30 or 40% in a given year for any number of reasons. I know a school that just this last year went from about 185 students to 65 students on the first day of school for no good reason. The bottom line is we care about our schools. It's not just about making the phone ring. It's not just about getting them to enroll, to pay the tuition. It's about bonding them to our school. Now, today we're talking about a specific problem that faces Montessori schools more than those of you who might be running K-8 schools that are not Montessori, or Montessori schools that go up into the 6th grade or the 8th grade. The bottom line, though, is I think this is relevant for everybody. Please, if you're not a Montessori educator, don't jump off the call. The truth is, one, we all have lots to learn from each other. The second is what is true for Montessori, which is the single largest independent school system in the world, 24,000 schools and running. And by the way, not a national franchise. Every one of us is a totally unique school, typically, except for some that are part of a network. But the bottom line is, I'm not the Montessori police. We passionately believe in Montessori. I confess to that. But I love every independent school. I believe in school choice. I am neither a liberal nor a conservative. This has nothing to do with politics. I just think that it's really important for families to be able to choose the education that they think is best. I also happen to believe in the voucher system, which for those of you who are in the public system may say, oh boy, Tim Selden's not one of our friends. I happen to believe in the idea of the marketplace of educational ideas. I happen to be very concerned about the American and the Canadian and most countries' government school system for a lot of reasons, mostly because they are politically controlled and because they're supported by state taxes. Families normally are assigned to them either by a lottery or by the fact they happen to live in a specific area. And I believe in the idea of school choice. Now, in our schools, we may take first come, first served on a waiting list. We may carefully select each other, but the bottom line is once we get them in, the goal is to try to minimize the chance that they will leave. Let me stop and see if anyone has anything they want to raise their hand and jump in on. You can say yes, but, or here's my experience, or ask a question. Anyone want to jump in? Nobody's doing that, so okay. Please do anytime. All right, so the title is Convincing Parents to Stay in Montessori through at least the kindergarten year. So if you're not running a Montessori school, if you're running a Forest school or a Waldorf school or a Rudolf Steiner school or a Quaker, I don't care whether it's kindergarten, whether it's staying in your school. If you go through 8th grade, you may be bleeding off kids at the end of 5th grade. It's the same basic issue. As soon as people think there's something more, better, and different, the tendency is to ask, is this all there is? Is the grass greener on the other side? Sooner or later, he's got to go to a real school, or sooner or later, I got to get him into another private school or whatever it is. People worry, is this good enough? Will I regret sending my child to this school? I believe that our goal is to create essentially a community of true believers. Now, by the way, just because they enroll in your school doesn't mean that they signed an oath of allegiance to the Episcopal Church or to the Quaker schools or the Waldorf schools or the Montessori schools or any other school. The bottom line is it is typically transactional. They're paying more money than we used to pay for a car in most cases to send their child to our school. They have lots of choices, including taking their child out of our school and immediately dropping out, if they're paying tuition, a big, big amount of money. These days in the United States, the odds are pretty good that your tuition is at least $10,000 a year, if not, excuse me, if not 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. At my alma mater, the Berry School, I think we're up to about 45,000. And trust me, that's not as expensive as it gets in the United States. So we are dealing with a truly significant financial commitment. Clint and I often talk about, what are you selling? What is your unique selling proposition? Are you communicating it correctly and well to parents who really aren't that into you? How do you get their attention in this incredibly overcrowded marketplace? How do you convince them, if it's one thing if you're offering infant care and there's a waiting list of 300 kids deep for every single space for an infant, but as soon as there is a publicly funded program, whether it's a local publicly funded program for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, it could be Head Start, it could be a Montessori public school that starts at age 3 on a lottery basis. It could be that you're in a state where there are publicly funded 4 and 5-year-old programs. We come from all over the world, you and I. We know that your situation may be different, but the bottom line is, sooner or later, we're up against competition that's serious, and our goal is to figure out how can we slow down attrition. It's not just, if I have 500 seats in my school, do I have 500 seats filled and paying tuition? There's more to this than money. This is all about building a relationship based school as opposed to transactional. I pay you money in tuition. I want to know what you're going to do for me. And by the way, every parent wants to know that. So again, it's a question of, why do people come to you? And I would suggest to you that regardless of how old their kids are, regardless of what kind of school you've got, whether it's special needs school, faith-based school, military academy, people are there because they expect that you're going to do something that's going to make their family better. And they want to know what it is, and they need evidence of it. And it really, really scares them if they don't see frequent, if not daily or hourly, evidence that convinces them that their money is well spent, that you love their child, that you know who they are as people, that their kid is getting a world-class education. And unfortunately, in a lot of places, what that means to them is your school is incredibly elitist, incredibly hard to get in, incredibly expensive, gifted and talented, long waiting list, and hours of homework and exams. And everyone's getting into Harvard is the fantasy, which you and I both know is garbage. It isn't what really happens. So again, our goal here is to try to build the school that everyone wants to send their kids to. Clint, before I go on, anything you want to say?
No, not necessarily, other than this is actually, when I was with Independent School Management, I was a part of a lot of the webinars there. And one thing that always stuck in my mind about retention was the concept of reinforcing the value proposition. and having to do that on a frequent basis, and that coming in a variety of ways. And so putting my marketing hat on, um, reinforcing the value proposition in your social media, reinforcing the value proposition in your email newsletter, reinforcing the value proposition in, using your classroom management tools that you communicate with your parents. So the consistently reinforcing the value proposition and tying it back to why they chose your school to begin with, and your mission, your values, your portrait of a graduate, it's vital for retention. Because I wish I still had this in front of me, but there's kind of like the how private school used to be versus how it is now, meaning when families and students would enroll, they would stay. But just because they're enrolled now doesn't mean they're going to stay. It's a totally different dynamic now, where they're always kind of looking and researching. So just to piggyback on what you had said about, essentially, you don't think about school in these terms, but ROI. What is the return on my investment? And they want to see that.
By the way, I'd love to know if you could put in the chat not only who you are, but whether you're with a Montessori school or what kind of school you're with if it's not Montessori. And it'll, to some extent, inform what I do next. And Clint, if you just let me know what you see as people fill it out.
Yeah, we've got one for Montessori so far.
Okay.
Couple. Two, three, non-Montessori but progressive K-8. So four, I think 4 of the 5 are Montessori. I know there's a few others on here that aren't necessarily Montessori as well. So we'll call it 90. We'll call it 90-10.
Fair enough.
90% Montessori, 10% non.
Here's the rationale. From a point of view of a parent, they're trying to solve a problem. If their children are really little, it could be they need a place to watch their child while they go to work, or to go to Pilates, or to play golf. But the odds are, or they're just their child is young and she's sort of burned out with being at home. She's watched enough of the Flintstones. She needs to be with other kids. They're trying to solve a problem. And it could be that they have no intention of staying with you or with any independent school. So as soon as public is available, they're out of here. The second possibility is that they are looking to go to an independent school. Montessori seemed to them like the only place that will take in their infant, their toddler, or their 3-year-old, because most independent schools don't. So most people go to either a kinder care or kids or kids or some franchise, or they go to a Montessori school or something like Reggio Emilia or Waldorf or other preschools. Montessori is unusual as a group because, one, there's so many of us, more than 5,000 in the US alone, and because almost every single Montessori school starts at least at age 3, if not at age 2 or at age 1, or I've got some schools that take in kids at about 1 week old. Infancy is increasingly common. If you have a K-8 school, whether progressive or not, you have a somewhat of an advantage, whether you're Montessori or not, because a parent entering your school may be coming in and figuring, I just think my kid needs a good solid foundation, and I'm going to be out of here as soon as I can. I think he could do well in public school because they can wipe out a lot of tuition costs. On the other hand, there are lots of people that will go into a K-8 school and say, I can at least know I've got my problem solved through the 8th grade. So it's a big, big advantage compared to those schools that only take in children at, let's say, infancy, toddlers, and up through kindergarten. So however it is, the normal tendency is a lot of schools, as soon as parents think there's a choice, they start looking, maybe this is the year that I ought to go to that choice. And public is most likely your biggest competitor. So we typically, at least in the Montessori world, we usually see a lot of enthusiastic parents who maybe are reading some Montessori books and they might be asking a lot of questions. I mean, there's nothing like the enthusiasm and the bond between Montessori toddler parents and Montessori toddler teachers. Those parents usually love those teachers. And then as soon as their kids go to primary, they may complain that the primary feels much colder and larger and very different from the toddler class. So bottom line is somewheres, whether at age 3 or at age 4 and 5, which in Montessori is common, or it could come in your school at a later grade, parents are starting to think that maybe it's time to go elsewhere. It could be they're thinking it's a real school. It could be that they're worried about whether, despite whatever their initial perceptions are, they may be worried whether or not your school is rigorous enough, because parents want to be sure that they will never regret sending their kid to your school. There may be a kid in the class that their child is in who's something of a bully. No parent's going to pay money to have their child in a class where they feel that the other children or the other parents are a problem. They don't want their child to have to put up with that. So they worry. They worry about, is my child loved? Do the teachers love them? Do the teachers love me? Do they respect me? Is my kid getting what he needs academically? Will he be prepared? The other thing is, quite often there is pressure. You know, money is tight. It's a limited commodity. There's nobody so rich that they can just throw money away. If people stay in an independent school, whether it's progressive, faith-based, Montessori, whatever, military, it's because they feel they're making an investment that they hope will pay off. And they're looking for evidence that their investment is not been made in vain. Right, Clint?
That's it. ROI.
And if your teachers are not providing constant, ongoing evidence that they can understand, keep in mind, these people have beans in their ears. They are so inundated with information, ads and emails and all kinds of stuff that's coming at them. You may be communicating with them and they may not even know that you're communicating. Many of you probably hear from some parents that your school uses too many different software platforms and they don't know where to go to get information about your school. Makes them crazy. So again, what we're trying to do is find a way to get teachers who are underpaid, and that's a whole conversation in itself, because no matter how much you want to, there's a limit to how much you can pay, which is directly connected to, after you pay every other bill, how much cash is there left. And so most of us have a limit on how much we can charge in tuition. We have a lot of expenses to pay. And I think we all do the best we can, but there's a good chance that from the point of view of your teachers, I don't think so. They think that you could and should be doing a lot more. I do want to remind everyone that after COVID, teachers tended to get much more burned out. Parents became much more aggressive. Um, Kids began to show up with more and more behaviors that acting out. And so there, the teachers that say school running isn't what it used to be, and I don't know if I like it anymore. This is a real issue for a lot of us. So what we've got to do is find a way to help families to see our school, whether it's Montessori or Reggio Emilia or Waldorf or Sidwell Friends or Quaker School, whatever. We need to communicate value in a way that they get it. That's the key. Now, again, people leave because of needing to save money. They do not see enough evidence of the students learning. In a very traditional school, probably this will not be as big a problem because you're going to be sending home textbooks and workbooks. You're probably going to send home grades, and maybe you're going to grade every single piece of homework. The bottom line, especially in Montessori schools and progressive schools, joyful learning doesn't usually look like a lot of busy work. So we're probably not sending home anything that people understand because we want to do hands-on experiential learning, which doesn't necessarily produce something the parent understands. If you're a Montessori school, there's a good chance you're using one of my favorite softwares. Montessori Compass is the one that Clint, I know you're connected to with the Montessori Growth Suite. We helped in the development of that years ago. We don't own it, but we love it. There's MRX, Montessori Records Express. Um, there's Transparent Classroom, which a lot of people use. The bottom line is a lot of good software. I make it very clear. My favorite, if you're a Montessori school, is Montessori Compass, but they all do the job. The bottom line, though, is what parents usually get doesn't make any sense to them. They get some pictures, which is nice. You probably do that regardless of what kind of school you're in. But what they usually get is a once a week list of lessons that their children were given. I'm sorry, the average parent says to me, I don't feel like this school communicates anywhere near enough. And I would wager that you're probably hearing that. In fact, I'm going to stop for a minute and ask you, can you please put in the chat a yes or no? Do your parents feel with by complimenting you, you guys are great at communicating everything I need to know, including how my kid is learning? Yes, is that true? Or no, they complain that, yeah, you're not doing a good job. I'd love to have you. Please tell us what you think. And really, no one wants to unmute.
I will. I actually had a tour this morning. I guess this is not necessarily current people talking about it, but prospective parents. I think especially with the younger children, toddler and children's house primary age, we have a lot of parents who will. I have a lot of parents who will ask, "Well, how do you communicate during the day?" Like I think they're expecting like an app or some sort of live, camera. And I always struggle with ways to explain, well, the teachers don't, they're teaching. They aren't able to communicate during the day, with in real time with families. So, I'm also trying to figure out what is the, why are some of these parents wanting this constant communication?
Well, that's a very good point, and I really appreciate you bringing it up, Adrian. Amanda, it's the bottom line is they're scared. They're scared their kids are going to be shot or
Yeah.
kidnapped. They're scared their kids are not going to get a good education. They're scared that they're going to go poopy in their pants. I mean, they're looking for a lot of feedback, and they often feel guilty. Oh my God, if I was a good mom or dad, I'd be home with my kid. Or for $25,000, I want egg in my beer. And our teachers really feel like our job is to teach. I would suggest to you that that's true, but if they don't find a way to communicate early and often, you're not going to hang on to a lot of parents. And you got to communicate smart because just junk communication that, or at least if the parents feel it's junk, isn't going to do any good. So you've got to be smart, got to be fast and efficient. It's got to be something your teachers can do practically. Um, and I don't think there's one answer. But yes, I think especially, Amanda, if you're talking about parents of children of, let's say, 1, 2, or 3, they want to know, will you tell me, did he eat lunch? Did he nap? Did he cry? Did he have a good day? Did he, have a bowel movement? They want to know that when my kid gets home at the end of the day, that, he's not going to be asleep because they want some time with their kid. They also conversely want to know that he won't have slept so long that they can't get him to bed at 11 o'clock at night. So it's really hard to please parents. They got all kinds of anxieties. And software is one of the core tools in communicating. And you're right, they would probably love video of your classroom. There's a reason why boarding kennels have video cameras on every dog crate showing how happy little Fido is. Many parents want to know because they're scared. Will my child be abused? On the other hand, most of us don't do that, at least not in our schools. And it's not really, I mean, I think most of us who have seen it feel kind of creepy about it. So we probably don't want it, even if the parents want it, but they probably do want it. And I'm not suggesting you got to give it to them. The bottom line is most of the people who leave us are not really that unhappy. They need an excuse to break up, or they may just leave in the quiet of the night and say, dear John, I just want to thank you, Tim, for everything you did for my child at the Barry Day School. She is so great. She reads like a charm. She loves school every day. I want you to be the first to know she's just gotten in to Sidwell Friends, and you know how hard it is to get into Sidwell Friends in Washington, D.C., and it's all because of you. And I'm going to tell every one of my friends that Barry School is the best platform to start your kid off. And you're sitting there saying, what, am I supposed to be happy or vomit? And so again, what we're trying to do is we can't make people love us, but if we don't help them to understand what we're doing for them, they will not stay. There's a book about dating called He's Just Not That Into You. And I think that for a lot of our schools that do have a problem of attrition, that's kind of what it's about. It's not that your teachers did something wrong, it's just we didn't do enough. So in Montessori, we talk about a 3-year cycle. For those of you that are not Montessori, please forgive me. I know this is boring to you, but I think it's important that you know if someone comes to you with a child who's a Montessori kindergartner, you may want to say, go back to your Montessori school and stay there for another year and apply to us next year. I know that doesn't sound like what you're going to do, but let me tell you why. In Montessori, the way it works is there's a very conscious cycle of human development, and it blossoms over a 3-year cycle. And the 3-year is not just 3 years in the same class, because we all know about what I call the gift of another year, where you get a little kid, maybe a 4-year-old with a early birthday that's close to the cutoff, and we say, you really ought to give your boy another year. Let him catch up, because boys often struggle when they're promoted prematurely. The bottom line is we really want people to have some idea of what's going on, and they may not want to know the details, but the odds are pretty good that whatever kind of school you're in, what parents want to know is the research evidence. Can you prove to me with hard data why what you're doing is doing a good thing for my child? So that's why they want test scores, they want letter grades, they want to see evidence. They would love to see research about your future graduates. They want to hear from past students, graduates. They want to hear how successful your kids get in, to, how many scholarship dollars do they get from Harvard. This is all pretty normal. In Montessori, we have a cycle. The first year, which is the 3-year-old year, by the way, if you could start Montessori much earlier. So ignore if they come in at birth like I did, or at first 1 year of age or 2 years of age. The 3-year-old cycle is a year where the child is just kind of getting oriented, they're learning how to learn, they're developing a sense of independence. We usually say, you're spending how much money to teach my child to wash a table? So they're becoming very independent. The second year is when the kids are really beginning to feel confident and refined. You're starting to see serious cultural literacy. Now we're really starting to see not only kids that can really wash a table and polish their shoes and probably cook up a gourmet meal, certainly cut up a banana with the best of them. Now you're starting to see kids who are doing serious word building. I mean, kids in Montessori usually can write before they can read. They probably are learning cursive handwriting. It might be print, it might be Danielian, but the irony is, whereas most of the world tries to teach kids phonetic decoding. One of the things that Piaget, Vygotsky, and Montessori learned is that in most of the Romance languages, French, Spanish, phonetic languages, and we're going to include English, which is not a Romance language, but it can be phonetic. If you kind of forget about the fact that we have digraphs like OUGH, we have eight, which have 8 different sounds, like OUGH in off, like in cough, or uff, like in enough. It goes on and on. So we have a lot of, quote, puzzle pronunciations in English, but it still works. But kids will normally learn to write before they can read. And it's kind of neat. I remember one little kid by the name of Bliss, whose mom was there at one of those evenings where the families come with their child and the child shows them how to do what they can do. And the kid is sitting there and the mom looks at the child, and I was recording at the time. And the kid says, she does something, and the mom says, Bliss, can you read? And Bliss turns to her and smiles and says, it's a secret, mommy. So many of us don't remember ever teaching a Montessori child to read. They just naturally tend to explode into it. Now, I take that with a grain of salt. Not every Montessori teacher and not every kid in today's post-COVID world is learning to read at 3. But normally in a good Montessori school, you're going to see some serious academic growth by age 4 that's pretty darn neat. And it will normally be way ahead of what kindergarten kids can do, or at least at the beginning of the year. In year 3, that's where the magic happens. So in a really solid Montessori classroom, by the way, I would argue that you could be a progressive school, and if you play your game right, you can end up with the same results with no Montessori materials and no Montessori teachers. If you know what you're doing. But in Montessori, we will usually see kids that have exploded into cultural literacy. They're talking about continental drift. They're talking about the parts of speech. They know a naming word and an action word, a describing word. They know what a verb is. They know that a group of geese is a gaggle, and a group of whales is a pod, and a group of lions is a pride. They know all kinds of stuff. They can use 3-dimensional materials and on paper solve all sorts of 4-digit mathematical problems. And hopefully they have memorized many of their math facts by the end of kindergarten. So they not only can write, by that age, they normally can read pretty darn well. And they may not be writing novels, and they may be spelling phone, F-O-N, instead of P-H-O-N-E, but they're usually well on their way to literacy and numeracy, and they can talk to you about nonagons, octagons, curvilinear triangles, spheres, triangular prisms, and all kinds of other stuff. And they know where Asia is, and it goes on and on and on. These are really amazing kids. There's a reason why Montessori is considered the gold standard for early childhood education. I would argue this is what everyone ought to do. I don't care whether you call it Montessori or not. This stuff works. Are there other things that work? Of course there are. Reggio Emilio produces very nice kids. Waldorf produces very nice kids. Quaker schools produce very nice kids. I happen to be a fanatical fan of Montessori. I don't think it's the only solution. I just think it's one that is based on science, on 118 years of experience around the world on a really huge scale, and was developed through essentially what we would now call brain research. So there's some real solid stuff behind Montessori. And if you're not a Montessori educator, I really, 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 as your friend, recommend take the time to learn. You will thank yourself later. Whether you call yourself Montessori, I don't care. We're not the Montessori police. It is not a franchise. So, bottom line, if you're a Montessori school like some of you are, the first 2 years are just the beginning. It's the 3rd year where children blossom. And helping parents to see it, understand it, believe it is really, really important. Now, if your school goes through 8th grade or your progressive school, you may have a different age where there's an issue. Probably it's when kids are getting ready to go into public middle school. You're probably losing your kids. Instead of staying through 8th grade, they may be leaving you at the end of 5th grade. Same fundamental problem, not the same brain development that's going on. By the way, the human brain, 70% of our brain development, according to Harvard, occurs by the end of age 6. So those early years are absolutely vital. And in my humble opinion, and I don't know, I'm very humble about this, I think that most schools are just not taking advantage of what kids are capable of doing in those early years, because most of us are high school educators or middle school educators, or we're used to working with older elementary kids. And, a lot of people say, I don't really like teaching little kids because, you can't have a conversation with them. And I'm sorry, you can teach philosophy and logic to kids that are 3 years old. You can teach law to kids that are 3 year old. Just read your Piaget and Vygotsky. You can do all kinds of things. So I am a fanatical believer that those teachers that work with really young kids are doing important work. Now, again, children in those early years, and you have to have a way of explaining this for your school, whether you're dealing with the problem of a Montessori school of convincing people to stay when there's public or other private schools that are trying to seduce them. You got to help them understand, if you stay, this is what your kid is going to get, or this is what they're going to miss if they don't stay. And I would suggest again, very few people these days are teaching, you know, uh, calligraphy or cursive handwriting. Geometry and geography and science is usually not seriously taught until much later. Mathematics, very few people come close to Montessori. Reading fluency and creative writing, I certainly see lots of schools that do a good job. Montessori plays with the best of them. All of it is based on what we now call the science of reading. So if you're not doing Montessori and you're doing science of reading, it's great. There's, the truth is the truth is the truth, whatever brand you put on it. We simply argue, let's make sure that our people enter the profession with as much knowledge and experience as possible. I also believe strongly that most of us, whether you're Montessori or not, what parents value is a sense of community, the sense that you're teaching my kid morals and values, empathy, maybe global awareness, because we're all running international schools. These are all big selling points for some parents. You can imagine that if they belong to QAnon, not so much. They may think this is not what we want for our kids. So that's the idea of school choice. We're not going to be right for everybody, but what we want to do is make the most of the families that are already in our school and help them to fall in love with us year after year after year after year, so we have minimal attrition. By the way, again, I would argue, ideally, we want to keep our attrition down to about 5%. I don't know what your attrition tends to be, and I'm sure there are certain ages or grades where it tends to be much bigger than others. For Montessori schools, it's usually at the transition into kindergarten, the kids disappear. Lots of kids leave. The other big attrition tends to be after kindergarten to 1st grade. They may stay for the early childhood, and then they go to public 1st grade, which is probably not so bad. I mean, if they do leave us then, it's sad for us, but the kid will probably still get a lot of value out of their Montessori experience. Let me just stop for a minute, see if anyone's got any questions or comments. Nope. Okay. Executive function. Again, I'm talking about Montessori because that's the world that I know best. The reality is almost every independent school I've ever known is aware these days of executive function development and is trying their darndest to develop those skills that Angela Duckworth and others identified up at University of Pennsylvania. So Montessori, I would argue, builds better brains. I would hope that your school does too. And it's not just intellect, it's creativity, it's imagination, sense of joy, sense of school is a great place, that their best friends are there. My goodness, we want a school where kids do not want winter break or summer vacation. They want to go to school because it's where the good stuff is. That's the goal of every one of us. So again, you just got to figure out, what do your parents want most to know about? And some of it's trial and error. Some of it will be, don't get caught up in the one-off examples, because any one parent could have something totally different that they care about. But you're looking for patterns. You're trying to reduce attrition, maximize your investment of time, money, and energy to try to keep as many families in your school voluntarily as you possibly can. So we need to try to help parents to see, these are strategies now. What can you do? Well, the first thing, I would argue, you want to try to get your parents into the classrooms to watch classes in action. That can be very, very hard, but there are all kinds of ways that all kinds of schools do it. Do the very best you can to get those parents into the school. There's always a chance on that particular day, their kid will have a meltdown, or some other kid will have a meltdown, or it will be a boring class, or it'll be rude, crude, and obnoxious behavior. I would rather risk that than not get those parents into the school. The more they're in that school, the more likely they are to understand and appreciate what we're doing. Second, we're probably all these days, thanks to smartphones and tablets and things like that, we're probably sending some kind of photos home. It may be that you're uploading them to an app, and once a week it's just doing a burst, or it could be that you're creating some kind of collection and you're sending at the end of the week, hey, take a look at the new pictures of our class this week. I can tell you what a parent wants is something that they cannot ignore. And it's real easy as a parent to ignore email. Clint, how many times does someone have to communicate with someone before they know you were even trying to talk to them?
Well, the old rule of thumb was what, 4 to 7 times. Now, depending upon which study you look at, see on the low end 11, high end 33. So let's call it anywhere from 11 to 33 touch points that families need to see.
Families are incredibly resistant. They're stressed. They're anxious. They want to know. And some of them they're in your face. They're on, probably Amanda, they're calling you up. Why aren't you sending me more information? But other parents, you send it to the same parent who's complaining, and they never, there was a meeting tonight. I'm going to do a meeting tonight for the children or the families of a particular school in North Carolina. And I think we have, out of 200 families, I think we've got about 16 people that will show up. That's better than nothing, but there are strategies that could have gotten it to a higher level. Now, nothing's perfect. What we're trying to do is do it early, do it often, do it well. That's what today's workshop's all about. So sending photo journals or videos is a good thing, but again, they got to know them. And if it's living inside of an app, if that app doesn't reach out and hit them in the face, like a text that says, you got mail, go look at it, click here, they may not ever look at that app, or it may be too confusing, or they may just forget. So again, people are really, really, really stressed. They're busy, they get distracted, and frankly, a lot of them are looking for an excuse to break up with you. So we're looking for families that really want the relationship to work. That's important. In the Montessori world, we have what we call the silent journey. Barbara Gordon, a famous Montessori educator, started that many, many years ago. It works great. And it would work in any of the private schools that I've ever worked with. It's the idea of taking families into the school, usually on a Friday night. You give them dinner, you maybe give them some wine, maybe not these days because of risk of lawsuits, but we feed them, maybe we watch their kids, whatever. And we just take them on a silent journey, maybe by candlelight, maybe with a little flashlight or a little thing that they're holding, through the classrooms on their hands and knees, and ask them to look from a child's viewpoint, child's head level. What does it look like from the youngest child in our school, the infants, through the oldest kids in the school? And if you're at a place like the Berry School, that means up through high school. So ideally, what we're trying to do is get people on that first night to just notice. They don't talk. We ask them to be silent. We don't lecture them. They can touch. They just have to put it back. They're observing. And part of the deal is you got to come back the next morning. We give you breakfast and we sit around and say, okay, so what did you notice? And then typically you go back through the journey again with small groups of these people through the school, and you start thinking about, okay, how does this develop from our youngest age level to our oldest? And I want you to appreciate it. By the way, every family I've ever met over my years running Montessori up through high school it's the high school that knocks the socks off the incoming toddler parent. The oldest kids in your school are the ones that will best sell your school. So even though from a parent point of view, they want to come in, look at the actual classroom, their kid's going to go in, see if the bathrooms stink, decide whether to apply or not, get out of there, 5 minutes, can I put my money down and start Monday? You want them to get to know your family. I often use dating as a metaphor on the idea that this is like building a family. And we want to slow people down. We do not want to turn them off. We don't want them to feel like, we're snobs, but we do want them to feel like Miracle on 34th Street. If we don't have what you want here at Macy's, we will help you find where you can find what's perfect for you. But the families that come to us, we want to be your forever home. That can scare parents, and I love scaring parents. I think that's great. What I used to tell parents is, look, this is your precious child. This is an incredibly expensive investment. I think it's worth it. I love our school. There are lots of great schools. This is your child. We're looking for the perfect match. We're looking for families who are going to fall in love with our unique school. By the way, if you're a Montessori school, we always say, do not sell Montessori, sell your individual school. People, Montessori schools are all over the board. Same thing with Reggio Emilia, same thing with Wall. Don't sell the method. Sell what is your school all about? Because that's what they know. They're looking at your school. And by the way, no negative advertising. Don't put down the public schools. Don't put down the Waldorf schools, the Steiner school, the Montessori schools, the military. Forget it. There's a school for every kid, for every family. You're trying to help families to find the school where their child will blossom. On the other hand, you as a school have limited dollars, limited hours. You got to work smart. And so everything you do, both on your initial marketing, admissions, and on your remarketing to your existing families, has got to be done efficiently, or you will bog down and you will start to lose it. Or your administration team will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and your budget will get overwhelmed. You got to work smart. So there are all kinds of strategies. Portfolios of student-led work really great. When I was a kid at Berry, one of the things they did, and I've seen other schools do it, is they would create like scrapbooks, really nice hand-bound books of the child's work for the year, the best work. So these were portfolios that weren't just giant envelopes. They were gorgeous keepsakes, hand lettered, Tim Selden, Barry School, class of 1963. And so they weren't just yearbooks in the sense of picture books that are printed. That's fine too. These were collections of evidence, artifacts of what your child did over this last year. So we can see together, you and your child and me, let's look back on your child's favorite poetry, photographs, essays, math problem, whatever the child was doing. The better you make this, the more likely parents will say, what can I do for you? Not what have you done for me? Emotional connection is everything. Whatever you can do to help your teachers. By the way, your teachers probably wish the kids, they love the kids. So mostly they love the kids. Probably some kids, they would just soon, they would say, this kid's a problem. So one of our issues these days is more and more teachers are saying kids are showing up with all kinds of learning disabilities or behavior problems we never saw before. And I'm not trained for this. I don't know what to do with it. Oh, don't get me started. The bottom line is our teachers tend to be burned out quickly. They tend to wish the kids did not come attached to parents. Unfortunately, with every kid, there's at least two parents, if not four or six or more. There may be a grandparent, sibling, who knows who's out there. You really want to create a relationship, first off, by helping the family to feel like you see them, you know them, you care about them. They are absolutely valued, loved parts of the community. They want to know that they can trust you. You will never, 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 pull a trapdoor under them and say, your kid's got a real problem. He's got to go to another school. They hate that. You've got to communicate with them a lot. And you've got to make sure that their children are not bullied, that they feel loved, they feel safe, they feel honored, they feel like this is our school. Now, a lot of ways to do that. You could do rah-rah cheerleading. Montessori tends to do something very different, a sense of this is a shared ownership, the children's house. However you do it, it's important. Relationships are everything. We want to celebrate children's growth, which means every year, not just when they graduate from one level of the school to the next, or they graduate out. It's really important to have lots of touch points. And I think, by the way, it's true in our family life too. Don't just celebrate a birthday, celebrate all kinds of things. We need to celebrate life together. And every single communication, every single interaction, if it's done right, can build a stronger relationship. Now, there are myths in every school. Catholic schools, Montessori schools, Reggio Emilia, all kinds of schools. In Montessori, a classic one is Montessori is great, but it's just airy-fairy, touchy-feely, crunchy granola, hippy-dippy. It isn't academic enough. It is absolute garbage. Montessori is the ultimate gifted and talented program. But our kids don't get ulcers. It's very rare to see a Montessori kid, hate school. It can happen, but it's very rare. Second, the idea that public schools are preparing kids for the real world, and boy, you got to get those kids out there sooner or later. I'm sorry, most schools around the world, public and private, are not preparing kids very well for the real world. Success in school often is connected directly to how wealthy, well-educated, and alert your parents are, which is fine. I mean, gosh, those kids get great education if they don't get drunk and drugged out or get ulcers. However, there's no question that the more educated parents are and the more involved parents are, the more likely those parents are to produce kids that do really well in school. So what we're trying to do is, again, get beyond myths, help people see the truth. And then lastly, kindergarten is free elsewhere, but boy, I'll tell you, public school is not the same, which doesn't mean it's bad. You got to help your parents to know what the difference is. I know we've come up on the hour, and I'm so sorry. I know some of you have a hard stop, and quite often when I got a big subject, it goes on longer. I'm going to keep going. Amanda, I appreciate that you're still here. I'm not going to drag it on forever and ever, but I do want to cover what's here so that at least on the recording, those you and everyone gets the recording, that you know what it was we were trying to cover. And again, Clint's going to send out the slideshow. He's going to send out an essay. And I think you're also going to send out Montessori curriculum guide that a school might find valuable as a handout to parents, maybe not. It's a gift from the Montessori Foundation for at least ages 3, 4, and 5 that's intended to show, oh my God, these kids learn so much more than I had any idea. Now, if it's not true in your school, you may want to call the Montessori Foundation or someone like us because we can help you solve that problem. But the idea is a great education. Money follows excellence. That's an old ISM saying, right, Clint? Money follows excellence. And I believe absolutely. So your education, whether you're Montessori or monastery or whatever, is a long-term investment. I think the point is we want to communicate, whether you're a Montessori school or not, that there's a package, there's a journey. This is not a 1-year thing. It's not a one night stand date. This is a program that you're involved in. And while you're not condemning your child to perdition, if they don't do the entire journey, you're going to get by far the best results, like in that progressive school. You're going to get the best results if you stay through the highest age level. Now, by the way, if the kid wants to leave, they're going to leave. If they feel like I've been here forever, I'm sick of it, I want something new, kid may not know what they're talking about, but there isn't much we can do to convince the family to stay. But I think that we need to help parents really be aware of it. And by the way, I would argue you need to be selling yourself to your own children. The more you're trying to help your children to feel special, to feel valued, to feel loved, to feel like they're part of something special, that's what every great independent school does. Right, Clint?
100%. I don't have much more to add to that. No, you're spot on.
So, these are things that I think are important. So you want to have some kind of events. The problem is getting parents to come out to them because, they're asking this, so why do I need to come out to listen to an Amway pitch? Why do I need to come out to have you tell me why I need to stay with you? They'd rather have their tooth drilled. The Simpsons are on tonight. There's something better they'd rather do. So you got to figure out what could you do and how can you get their attention. And it's hard. In an earlier age, we used to do lots of really good food and really good wine and childcare. These days, probably it's going to be pizza, soda, no liquor, no wine, no beer, and free childcare. The bottom line is you've got to make it really easy for them to come. People don't want to spend $50 or more to come and pay a babysitter so they can listen to you and sit on little chairs under fluorescent lights when they're tired and they're burned out and their spouse is sitting there looking at text on a cell phone, sitting on little chairs in your turf. I'm sorry, they don't want to do it. Not unless they feel really bonded to your school. So make it as comfortable as you possibly can. Reminders, personal phone calls tend to help a lot. Not every school has someone that's willing to make 500 individual phone calls. That's what we use telephone trees and ambassador parents, so forth for. But anything you can do to get their attention. Now, as Clint keeps saying about marketing, a text is about 10 times more likely to be read than an email. Something that comes in the mail, maybe they'll pay attention to, maybe. The bottom line is you've got to tell people multiple times, not once a month in a newsletter. You got to be doing it often, and you got to do as many different channels as you can. And you have to use as many different opportunities without annoying them. We're not trying to make them hate our guts. We want them to just know we care. We really want you to know this is going to be something you want to attend. So parent education nights, like the science of how children learn, the idea of the journey, the silent journey is a great thing. Alumni parent panels is used in a lot of schools, where you get graduates to come. And personalized conferences with the family and the teacher, where the teacher helps the family think about what we're going to be working on with your child at our school next year. And with the kid present, by the way, all of those things tend to help. There are lots of other strategies too. So how do you get parents to attend? Free childcare. Do not put them in little kid chairs if you're running a preschool. Feed them and give them something to drink. Remind them often in advance, give them plenty of notice, give them personalized invitations, and make the event a really good experience. They don't want to be lectured. I mean, I've been lecturing you guys because you're not talking very much. That people don't like that. So you want to make it hands-on. So lastly, I think what I want you to hear is re-enrollment really starts with recruitment. It's about admissions. Be very clear when you're letting a family in the school, we're looking for people who want to be here through high school or through our highest grade. You can't make them stay, but if you don't ask, you're not going to get. If they don't even know that that's the expectation, isn't a chance. Start working on re-enrollment at the beginning of school, not just before re-enrollment starts. Reinforce this concept again and again and again. All kinds of opportunities in newsletters, conferences, and in daily interactions. Like as I've been walking around the school that I'm at in North Carolina, I'm saying to parents as I meet, "Hi, will you be here with us tonight?" The more you make personalized invitations, the better. And then use language like, and this is true not just for Montessori, but for any school. Next year, your child will be a classroom leader, or this is what things will be like when your child moves into our middle school. The bottom line is doing this again and again and again builds up a sense of a coherent message that parents actually remember, and that works. So we've got to inspire confidence. Again, we've got to help people to believe what we're doing with their child pays off. We want to give them lots of examples, preferably told in real time by real families of kids that went to the school and are doing great, or by the kids themselves looking back and saying, this is the best years of my life. You will never regret going to the Barry School. You want to reference whatever data and research you've got. By the way, I'm a great believer in schools doing longitudinal studies. So instead of just looking at outside research, like the research that shows that kids going to independent schools or parochial schools tend to do better for the rest of their life than kids going to the average government school, that's good. But longitudinal studies of your kids, tracking them from the time they start until 10, 20 years later or on into adulthood is wonderful. And I think more of us need to do that. I think we need to be very focused on how our economy is changing. Right at the moment, most of the jobs that will exist in 10 years do not exist yet. And we don't know what skills kids are going to need. Right at the moment, people are thinking we teach them how to use AI, that alone will do it. Unfortunately, a lot of the jobs that will be done by AI will replace the jobs that they think they were training for. So the bottom line is we don't know what the future is bringing. We need to help our kids to learn as many different skills as possible, especially how to learn. The bottom line is we are trying to create joyful scholars. We want to show how our school, Montessori or otherwise, is directly connected to the very skills that pay off in conventional schools if they're going to go on to traditional first grade, private schools, university, whatever. We want to help them see why it works and that it does work. The bottom line is your school and my school, we're not just preparing kids for the next grade, we're preparing them for the rest of their lives. And that's the real message. This is an education for life. And so for this week, that's it. And we really appreciate all of you staying here over time. I hope you found it valuable, and I still have some time. If you want, and Clint, if you've got to go off to something else, I understand. Um, but I just want to invite anyone who's here who wants to unmute, please do. Nobody? No one in chat? See, something came up in chat. I see Rapali, hi.
Tim, if I may have missed this. There was a question from Amanda as we approached the hour. Was about, is the portfolio something that can be used in prospective parent-family visits, like as an example of work? I'm not sure if you answered that.
No, I didn't see it. It's hard to do it because it's a child's individual work. So you'd have to have a family that first off is willing to give up what's probably a precious artifact. I mean, if you think about it, if it's really well done, it is not just a big pocket envelope that you put every piece of artwork and other stuff in. It's a beautiful bound book. Um, but you can definitely create examples of phony baloney. I mean, AI would easily do that. And you give them a good sense if you're going to do it. I highly recommend them. And I also recommend how hard it is to get teachers to do it, unless you could get parent volunteers to help create it or older kids who learn to do it, both for themselves and each other. And by the way, I was working with a school the other day that was concerned that one of their early childhood classes needed a good cleanup. And guess what the elementary kids did? They volunteered, they went down there, they cleaned it up for the teacher and the younger kids with the younger kids. That's a great example of using our older kids to help.
Tim, there was a question about from Rapali about I'm wondering how we can make the academic achievements and social emotional skills visible during open house events.
Well, I mean, Rapali, I'm a great believer in having a curriculum guide. You can, I can give you a PDF version for free. You can license it from the Montessori Foundation and use it in software. We have a really sophisticated curriculum scope and sequence for Montessori that you might find useful. But the bottom line is, I have a great big binder, 4-inch binder. I show it. Parents don't take it home, although I think Clint, I gave you one of the PDFs to send out is an example of the 3, 4, and 5-year-old curriculum. So
Yeah.
that's one thing you can do. Hey, there's no one way. My mother used to drag me into open houses and have me read Shakespeare to kids at age 6. She thought that that was the way of proving that we did. There's no one way. Be creative, use all kinds of strategies, use videos of your kids at work, use the videos that exist online. Many of your schools, like Cassidy School in Kansas, Oklahoma City, has great videos that they've made of their school. Use every trick in the book. Anyone else? I see that some parents say that we're doing well, some say we're not. This is very normal. Again, building these relationships of trust, it starts before they get into your school, not after. Once they're in your school, they're already beginning to ask, is there something more? When will I be leaving? So they're looking for an excuse to be disappointed in you. Just know that. It's all about building very, very powerful relationships. Those of you who have ever worked with the Montessori Foundation as a client school, you probably notice when you call, we answer 24 hours a day. And it's usually me in the middle of the night. We are here to help. It's seamless, absolute commitment to help every school that we can, which doesn't mean we can do everything for everybody. And it doesn't mean we're cheap. We're an investment like your school. The bottom line is people need to know you care, that you really, really, really care. As a business, as a school, that's what it's all, and as a teacher, that's what it's all about. And yeah, teachers often feel like you don't pay me enough to care. That's a problem. And that's one of the other topics that Clint and I talk about on our Thursday webcast is how do you get your teachers to care? The bottom line is it's like running a restaurant. You have to go out to the very best purveyors of fruit and vegetables and meats and whatever, and are the very best chefs and give people the best, freshest ingredients. It's hard. It's hard to recruit great teachers. It's hard to keep great teachers. It's easy to lose them. The bottom line is, if this was easy, my grandmother would be doing it. By the way, my grandmother did do it, but that's another story. I think we all have to just love ourselves, love our schools, and do the very best we can. And if you don't know how to do it, let someone help you put it into place. Clint has great software. I'm a great believer of Clint's software. I've been using Clint's software for at least 2 years, 3 years. I still don't understand Clint's software. Only way I'm going to learn Clint's software is if Clint personally helps me to set it up and shows me and my team how to do it. That's true for so many things in this world, folks. It's all about service. It's all about relationship. It's all about earning people's trust, confidence, and gratitude. That's probably a good note to end on. Any other last thing in there?
No, I think you nailed it. It's a great place to end.
All right. Goodbye, folks. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.